They say honesty is the foundation of a strong marriage. I used to believe that too, until I told my husband the truth and watched everything I thought I knew about us unravel in an instant. It started as a fleeting mistake, a moment of weakness that spiraled into something I couldn't contain. His name was Daniel, a colleague I'd worked with for years. What began as harmless conversations over coffee turned into late-night texts, lingering glances, and eventually, something more. I didn't plan to tell my husband, Ryan, but the guilt was suffocating, eating away at me until I could barely look him in the eye. So one evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I decided to come clean. "Ryan, there's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice trembling. He looked up from his plate, his brow furrowed in concern. "What's wrong?" I made a mistake," I said, my stomach twisting into knots. "There's someone at work. His name is Daniel. And I crossed a line." For a moment, Ryan didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his face a mix of shock and something else I couldn't quite place. "When you say crossed a line," he said slowly, his voice tight, "what exactly do you mean?" I couldn't look at him. "I kissed him," I admitted. "It happened once. And I'm so sorry, Ryan. I swear it didn't mean anything." The silence that followed was unbearable. I braced myself for anger, for shouting, for tears. But when Ryan finally spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "I see," he said, leaning back in his chair. "So, what do you want to do about it?" His reaction caught me off guard. I'd expected fury or heartbreak, not this measured, almost clinical response. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't keep it from you. I needed to be honest." Ryan nodded slowly, as if he were processing the weight of my confession. "Do you still want to be with me?" he asked. "Yes," I said quickly, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Of course I do. I love you, Ryan. This was a mistake, one I'll regret for the rest of my life." For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face, something that looked like pain. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Okay," he said finally. "Then maybe we need to think about how to move forward." The next few days were tense. Ryan and I tiptoed around each other, our conversations polite but strained. I could feel the distance growing between us, an invisible chasm that neither of us seemed to know how to cross. Then one evening Ryan broke the silence. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady but cautious, "about what happened. About us." I nodded, my heart racing. And I think, maybe we need to try something different," he said. "Different how?" Ryan hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "What if we open things up?" "Open things up?" I repeated, confused. "You made a mistake," he said. "And I'm not saying it's okay, but maybe there's a way for us to stay together without pretending everything is perfect. Maybe we could try open relationships, set some boundaries, see how it works." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, this wasn't one of them. "You mean, seeing other people?" I asked, struggling to process what he was suggesting. "Maybe," he said. "I don't know. I just think, if we're honest about it, maybe it won't hurt as much." I didn't know what to say. The idea of opening up our marriage felt foreign, terrifying, like stepping into uncharted territory. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the part of me that wondered if it might actually work. "Let me think about it," I said finally, my voice shaking. Ryan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take your time," he said. "There's no rush." But I knew that wasn't entirely true. Because whether I wanted to admit it or not, the clock was already ticking on our marriage. Ryan's suggestion lingered in the air between us like an unwelcome guest. I couldn't stop thinking about it, turning his words over and over in my mind. Open relationships. It wasn't just the concept that scared me, it was what it meant. Was this Ryan's way of punishing me? Of saying, if you want to stray then fine, but don't expect me to stay faithful while you do it? Or was it something else entirely? I tried to go about my routine as if nothing had changed, but the tension in the house was impossible to ignore. Ryan and I were polite, even kind to each other, but it felt forced, like we were both trying to act normal without knowing what normal even meant anymore. One evening, after another quiet dinner, Ryan broke the silence. "Have you thought about what I said?" he asked, his voice steady. "I have," I said, setting down my fork. But I'm still not sure what to think. Ryan nodded, his expression calm. It's not something we have to decide right away, he said. I want us to figure out a way to stay together without pretending we're something we're not. And you think this is the way to do that? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know, he admitted. But I think it's worth considering. That night I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as Ryan slept beside me. My mind was racing with questions, fears, doubts. Was this really what our marriage had come to? A desperate attempt to hold on to each other by letting go of exclusivity? I thought about Daniel, about the mistake that had brought us to this point. I didn't love him, I never had. But in that moment of weakness he'd made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Was that what Ryan wanted now? To feel seen by someone else the way I had? The next morning I decided I couldn't keep my thoughts to myself anymore. I need to understand, I said as we sat at the kitchen table, coffee mugs between us. Why do you want this, Ryan? Is it because of what I did? Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Partly, he admitted. But it's not just that. I think we've been stuck for a while, Liv. Even before Daniel. And maybe this is a way to unstick ourselves. But doesn't it feel wrong? I asked. Maybe, he said. But so does pretending everything's fine when it's not. His words hit me harder than I expected. Because the truth was, he was right. Our marriage hadn't been fine for a long time, not really. We agreed to talk more before making any decisions. Ryan wanted to set rules, boundaries, things that would make the idea of opening up our relationship feel less terrifying. It's not about falling in love with someone else, he said firmly. It's about being honest with each other. About having the freedom to explore without lying. And what if it doesn't work? I asked. Then at least we tried, he said quietly. In the days that followed, we started laying the groundwork for what an open relationship might look like. We have to be completely honest, Ryan said. No secrets. If we're going to do this, we need to talk about everything. Okay, I said, nodding. No secrets. And no long-term relationships, he added. If we start to develop feelings for someone else, we end it immediately. I hesitated but agreed. The thought of Ryan falling for someone else made my chest ache, but I knew I couldn't ask him to make rules I wasn't willing to follow myself. Our first real test came a week later, when Ryan told me he'd joined a dating app. It's just to see what's out there, he said, his tone cautious. I haven't messaged anyone yet. The admission made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to smile. Okay, I said. Are you going to do the same? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. I'm not sure I'm ready. Ryan nodded, his expression understanding. That's okay, he said. There's no pressure. But I could feel the pressure anyway. A few days later, I took the plunge and created my own profile. It felt surreal, scrolling through pictures of strangers, reading bios filled with jokes and hobbies and aspirations. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, if I was looking for anything at all. But the mere act of putting myself out there felt like a step into a world I barely understood. That evening I told Ryan about it. I made a profile, I said, my voice shaking slightly. How does it feel? He asked, his tone neutral. Strange, I admitted. Like I'm doing something I shouldn't. You're not, he said gently. This is what we agreed to, remember? I know, I said. But it still feels complicated. Ryan nodded, his eyes meeting mine. It is, he said simply. But maybe complicated is what we need right now. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into something we couldn't fully control. But maybe that was the point. The idea of an open relationship was easy to talk about in theory. But putting it into practice was something else entirely. Ryan and I had agreed to take things slow, to approach this experiment with caution. But the first time I saw a notification pop up on his phone, a message from someone named Lila, I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. Jealousy. I hated admitting it, but there it was. Who's Lila? I asked that evening, trying to sound casual as we cleaned up after dinner. Ryan hesitated, then said, Someone I matched with on the app. We've just been chatting. Are you going to meet her? I don't know, he said honestly. I wanted to talk to you about it first. The fact that he was being so upfront should have reassured me, but instead it made my chest tighten. And how do you feel about it? I asked, my voice trembling. I feel conflicted, he admitted. I don't want to hurt you, Liv. But we agreed to try this, right? I nodded, forcing a smile. Right. That night, as Ryan scrolled through his phone beside me in bed, I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. I brought us to this point, I knew that. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing something I couldn't get back. A few days later, I received my first real message on the app. Olivia. Your profile caught my eye. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? The message was from a man named Alex. His profile was unremarkable. He liked hiking, cooking, and indie music. But there was something kind about his smile in the photo. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to delete it, to shut this whole thing down before it went any further. But another part of me, the part that had kissed Daniel, that had felt the thrill of being noticed, was curious. Finally, I typed a response. Hi, Alex. Coffee sounds great. When I told Ryan about Alex, his reaction surprised me. That's great, he said, smiling. I hope you have a good time. You're really okay with this? I asked, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. I think so, he said. Are you? I don't know, I admitted. Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. Maybe we just need to trust the process, he said. Meeting Alex was surreal. We chose a quiet cafe in the city, far enough from home that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. When he walked in, he looked just like his photos, friendly, approachable, safe. Olivia? He asked, smiling as he approached my table. That's me, I said, standing to shake his hand. The conversation was easy, pleasant. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, the things we loved and the things that annoyed us. But the whole time I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan. When I got home that evening, Ryan was waiting for me on the couch. How was it? He asked, his tone curious but calm. It was nice, I said, setting my bag down. Alex is sweet. We talked for a couple of hours. Are you going to see him again? I don't think so, I admitted. There wasn't really a spark. Ryan nodded, his expression unreadable. That's okay, he said. How about you? I asked. Have you talked to Lila again? I have, he said. She asked if I wanted to meet up. And what did you say? I told her yes, he said after a pause. But only if you're okay with it. The idea of Ryan meeting Lila made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to nod. We said we'd try this, I said, my voice steady. So, okay. Ryan reached over and took my hand, his touch gentle but firm. We'll get through this, Liv, he said. I wanted to believe him. The day of Ryan's date with Lila, I couldn't focus on anything. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, baked a loaf of bread and rearranged the furniture in the living room, all just to keep myself busy. But when Ryan walked through the door that evening, his expression calm and untroubled, I felt a wave of relief I hadn't expected. How was it? I asked, trying to sound casual. It was nice, he said, echoing my own words. She's interesting. Smart. But I don't think I want to see her again. Why not? Ryan hesitated, then said. Because the whole time all I could think about was you. His words hit me like a tidal wave. I thought this was what you wanted, I said, my voice trembling. I thought so too, he admitted. But now I'm not so sure. What do we do, Ryan? I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. I don't know, he said, his voice breaking. But we'll figure it out. Together. That night, for the first time in weeks, we held each other as we fell asleep. And for a brief, fleeting moment it felt like maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Ryan's words lingered in my mind long after that night. Maybe I don't want this. It should have felt like a relief, like an escape from the chaos we'd plunged ourselves into. But instead it filled me with more questions. What did he mean? Was he ready to shut the door on this experiment? Or was he simply unsure of what he wanted? And what did I want? For a few days we avoided the topic altogether. Life went on as usual, or at least as close to usual as it could get. We went to work, made dinner, watched TV. But beneath the surface I could feel the tension building, like a storm waiting to break. One evening as we sat in the living room, Ryan finally broke the silence. We need to talk, he said, his voice calm but firm. I know, I said, setting down my glass of wine. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. How do you think this is going? The question caught me off guard. I don't know, I admitted. It's been complicated. Do you think it's helping? He asked. I don't know, I said again, frustration creeping into my voice. What about you? Do you think it's helping? Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I think it's shown me some things, he said. Like what? Like how much I still love you, he said quietly, and how much I hate the idea of losing you. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. For weeks, I'd been carrying the weight of guilt, convinced that I'd destroyed everything we'd built together. But hearing Ryan say he still loved me, that he was still fighting for us, was almost too much to bear. I don't want to lose you either, I said, my voice breaking. Then what are we doing, Liv? He asked, his eyes searching mine. Why are we putting ourselves through this? Because we didn't know what else to do, I said honestly. That night we stayed up late, talking about everything we'd been avoiding. Ryan admitted that while he'd been curious about open relationships, actually living it had made him realize how much he valued what we had. I thought it would make things easier, he said. But it's just made me see how much I want us to work. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I want that too, Ryan. More than anything. We decided to press pause on the experiment to take a step back and focus on us. It wasn't an easy decision. Part of me still wondered if we were just delaying the inevitable, if we were too broken to fix. But another part of me, a quieter, more hopeful part, believed that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. Some days it felt like we were making progress, like we were rediscovering the connection that had brought us together in the first place. Other days it felt like we were stuck in the same patterns, circling the same wounds we didn't know how to heal. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Ryan turned to me and said, I think we should go to therapy. Couples therapy? I asked, surprised. Yeah, he said. I think we need someone to help us figure this out. I was hesitant at first. The idea of airing our problems to a stranger felt uncomfortable, even embarrassing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Ryan was right. If we wanted to save our marriage, we couldn't do it alone. Our first session was awkward, to say the least. The therapist, a calm, empathetic woman named Dr. Harper, asked us to share why we were there. I cheated, I said, my voice trembling. And we've been trying to figure out how to move forward. Ryan nodded. We thought opening up the relationship might help, but it's only made things more complicated. Dr. Harper listened intently, nodding as we spoke. It sounds like you've both been trying to navigate a lot of pain and confusion, she said. But the fact that you're here shows that you're willing to fight for this relationship. Over the next few sessions, we began unpacking everything we'd been carrying. My infidelity, Ryan's feelings of betrayal, the disconnect that had led us to this point. It was raw and painful, but it also felt like progress. For the first time in months, we were being honest with each other. Not just about what had happened, but about how we felt. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, Ryan turned to me and said, I'm glad we're doing this, Liv. I feel like I'm starting to see you again. I feel the same way, I said, my voice soft. It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic breakthrough, but it felt like a step in the right direction. As the weeks went on, we began rebuilding the foundation of our marriage piece by piece. We started spending more quality time together, going on walks, cooking meals, talking about things that mattered. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of doubt, but we were trying. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on the same team. Therapy became a lifeline for us, a place where we could unpack the emotions we'd been burying for so long. Dr. Harper encouraged us to revisit the early days of our relationship, to talk about what had brought us together in the first place, what we'd loved about each other before everything got so complicated. I loved how thoughtful you were, Ryan said one session, his voice soft. You always noticed the little things, like when I needed space or when I was having a bad day. I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes. And I loved how steady you were. You made me feel safe, like I could face anything with you by my side. It was a bittersweet exercise, a reminder of what we'd once had and what we were fighting to rebuild. But rebuilding wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, of doubt, of hurt. Ryan and I had opened up old wounds during this process, and healing them wasn't something that could happen overnight. One evening, as we sat on the couch after dinner, Ryan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we'll ever get back to where we were?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted, my chest tightening. "But maybe we don't need to. Maybe we can build something new. Something stronger." Ryan nodded, his eyes softening. "I like the sound of that," he said. As the weeks turned into months, we started to find a new rhythm. We began setting aside one night a week just for us. No work, no phones, no distractions. Sometimes we'd go out for dinner or a movie. Other times we'd stay in and cook together. At first, it felt a little forced, like we were trying too hard to recapture something that had slipped away. But over time, those nights became something I looked forward to, a chance to reconnect, to remind ourselves of why we were still here. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Ryan reached over and took my hand. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his voice hesitant. "What is it?" "I think I'm ready to let go of what happened," he said. "Not forget it, but not let it define us anymore." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "I want that too," I said. Letting go wasn't as simple as saying the words, but it was a start. We still had moments of doubt, moments when the past threatened to creep back in. But we faced those moments together, leaning on each other instead of pulling away. One day, during a session with Dr. Harper, she asked us to write letters to each other, letters we'd read aloud in our final session. First, the idea terrified me. What if I couldn't find the right words? What if my letter didn't capture everything I wanted to say? But as I sat down to write, the words began to flow. "Dear Ryan, I don't know where to begin, so I'll start with this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you, for the mistakes I made, for the trust one broke. There isn't a day that goes by when I don't regret what happened. But more than that, I'm grateful. Grateful that you chose to stay, to fight for us, to believe that we were worth saving. You've shown me what love really means: patience, forgiveness, strength. And I promise to spend the rest of my life earning that love, showing you that I see you, that I value you, that I'm all in. Thank you for not giving up on me, Ryan. Thank you for believing in us. Love, Olivia." When the day came to read our letters, I was nervous, my hands shaking as I unfolded the paper. But as I read aloud, I felt the weight of my words, the truth in them, and I saw the emotion in Ryan's eyes. When it was his turn, his voice trembled as he read. "Dear Olivia, I'll be honest, there were times when I thought we wouldn't make it, times when I thought the pain was too much to get past. But then I'd think about everything we've been through together, everything we've built, and I knew I wasn't ready to let it go. You hurt me, Liv. But you also showed me what it means to fight for something, to work through the hard parts instead of walking away. I still love you. I've always loved you. And I'm ready to move forward, to build something new with you. Something even better than what we had before. Thank you for staying, for fighting, for believing in us. Love, Ryan." By the time he finished, tears were streaming down my face. Dr. Harper smiled warmly. "It sounds like you've both come a long way," she said. Ryan reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "We still have a long way to go," he said. "But we'll get there," I added, my voice steady. As we left the office that day, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. We weren't perfect and we never would be. But we were trying. And sometimes that was enough. After our final session with Dr. Harper, Ryan and I entered a new phase of our marriage. It wasn't as if everything suddenly fell into place. There were still challenges, still moments when the past crept in like an unwelcome guest. But there was also progress. A growing sense of trust and understanding that hadn't been there before. We were no longer trying to go back to what we'd been. Instead, we were learning how to move forward, to redefine what us meant. One of the first things we did was revisit the open relationship conversation, not to revive it, but to close the door on it for good. "I thought opening things up would give us freedom," Ryan admitted one evening as we cooked dinner together. "But all it did was make me realize how much I value what we have." I nodded, my chest tightening. "I felt the same way," I said. "I thought it might help us, but it just made me see how much I want to be here with you." Ryan smiled, reaching for my hand. "Then let's make a promise," he said. "No more experiments. No more distractions. Just us." "Just us," I agreed, squeezing his hand. With that promise, we began focusing on rebuilding our connection. We tried new things together, taking dance lessons, exploring nearby hiking trails, even joining a local trivia league. Each shared experience felt like another brick in the foundation we were rebuilding, a reminder of why we'd fallen in love in the first place. But it wasn't just about the fun moments. We also made a conscious effort to communicate more openly, to check in with each other even when it felt uncomfortable. "How are you feeling today?" Ryan would ask, his tone gentle but genuine. "Good," I'd say some days. Other days I'd admit, a little off. And we'd talk about it until I felt like myself again. It was a small thing, but it made a big difference. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Ryan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "I was thinking about our anniversary," he said. "It's coming up soon." I smiled, surprised. "You're actually planning something?" "Maybe," he said, grinning. "But I wanted to ask, what would you want to do?" "Something special." "Honestly," I said, leaning back in my chair, "I think I'd just like to spend the day with you. No big plans, no distractions. Just us." Ryan nodded, his eyes softening. "That sounds perfect," he said. When our anniversary arrived, Ryan surprised me with a picnic in the park where we'd had our first date. "I wanted to bring us back to where it all started," he said as we spread out the blanket. As we ate, we reminisced about that first date. The awkward silences, the nervous laughter, the way we'd both known by the end of the evening that something special was beginning. "I don't think I've ever been more nervous," Ryan admitted, laughing. "You hid it well," I said, smiling. "I thought you were completely calm." "I was a mess," he said. "But I knew I didn't want to mess it up." I reached for his hand, my heart swelling. "You didn't," I said softly. That evening, as we walked home hand in hand, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We'd been through so much. Mistakes, heartbreak, moments when it felt like everything was falling apart. But somehow we'd found our way back to each other. And while our marriage wasn't perfect, it was real. It was ours. A few weeks later, Ryan surprised me with another idea. "I was thinking we should go on a trip," he said one evening as we sat on the couch. "A trip?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," he said, his eyes lighting up. "Somewhere new, somewhere we've never been. Just the two of us." I smiled, the thought of an adventure filling me with excitement. "Where were you thinking?" "I'll let you decide," he said, grinning. "This is your reward for putting up with me all these years." "Careful," I teased. "I might pick somewhere crazy." "Then I guess we're going on a crazy trip," he said, pulling me into his arms. The trip became a symbol of our new beginning. A chance to leave behind the baggage of the past and embrace the future with open hearts. We chose a quiet beach town, a place where we could relax, explore, and just be together. As we walked along the shore one evening, the sound of the waves crashing against the sand, I turned to Ryan and said, "Do you think we'll ever look back on all of this and feel grateful?" Ryan thought for a moment, then nodded. "I already do," he said. "Not for the pain, but for what it taught us. For where it brought us." I smiled, his words settling in my heart. "Me too," I said. That night, as we sat on the balcony watching the moonlight dance on the water, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. We still had work to do, still had moments of doubt and struggle ahead, but we were moving forward together. And for the first time, I truly believed that was enough. When we returned from the beach, life felt different. Not perfect, but lighter, more hopeful. The trip had been a reminder of what we were working toward. A glimpse of the life we could build together if we kept choosing each other every day. But as we settled back into our routines, I knew the real work wasn't over. One of the biggest challenges was learning to trust myself again. For so long, I defined myself by my mistakes, by the pain I'd caused. It was hard to let go of that guilt, to believe I deserved the forgiveness Ryan had given me. "I don't want you to keep punishing yourself," Ryan said one evening as we sat in bed, the glow of the lamp casting soft shadows on the walls. "I'm trying," I said, my voice trembling. "But it's hard." "I know," he said, reaching for my hand. "But you've done the work, Liv. You've shown me how much you care, how much you want this. It's time to let yourself off the hook." His words brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. As time went on, we began building new memories, ones that weren't weighed down by the past. We hosted dinners with friends, went on weekend road trips, and spent lazy Sundays reading or binge-watching our favorite shows. Each moment felt like another stitch in the fabric of our marriage, weaving us closer together. One afternoon, as we walked through the park near our house, Ryan stopped suddenly and turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his tone serious. "Of course," I said, my heart skipping a beat. "Do you think this has made us stronger?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think it has," I said. "Not in the way I expected, but yes." "Me too," he said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Why do you ask?" I pressed. "I don't know," he said, shrugging. "I guess I've just been thinking about how far we've come." That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I found myself reflecting on Ryan's question. Had this experience made us stronger? In some ways, yes. It had forced us to confront our flaws, to have hard conversations, to face the parts of ourselves we'd been avoiding. But more than that, it had taught us the importance of choice. Every day, we chose each other, through the good moments and the hard ones, through the laughter and the tears. And in that choice, I found strength I hadn't known I possessed. A few months later, we celebrated our anniversary with another trip, this time to the mountains. As we hiked through the forest, the crisp autumn air filling our lungs, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. For Ryan, for our journey, for the love we'd rebuilt. One evening, as we sat by the fire in our cozy cabin, Ryan reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook. "What's that?" I asked, curious. "It's something I've been working on," he said, handing it to me. I opened the notebook and saw pages filled with handwritten memories, stories of our time together, from the day we met to the present. "I wanted to write down all the things I love about us," he said, his voice soft. Tears filled my eyes as I read his words, each one a testament to the life we'd built together. "Ryan, this is beautiful," I said, my voice trembling. "So are you," he said, pulling me into his arms. As we sat there, wrapped in each other's warmth, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. We weren't perfect, and we never would be. But we were stronger. And for the first time, I felt truly ready to embrace whatever the future held, together. A year later, Ryan and I celebrated another milestone, renewing our vows. Surrounded by friends and family, we stood in a sunlit garden and promised to keep choosing each other, to keep fighting for what we'd built, to keep growing together. "I love you," Ryan said as he slipped the ring back onto my finger. "I love you too," I said, my heart full. As we walked back down the aisle hand in hand, I knew one thing for certain. We'd faced the storm, and we'd come out the other side stronger than ever. And that was a love worth fighting for.